The Richardson family gathered in the wood-paneled office of Walter Hayes, their parents' attorney for over 30 years. Outside, rain pounded against the windows, a fitting backdrop for what was about to become the darkest day in their family history since the funeral 2 weeks ago. Sarah, the eldest at 42, sat ramrod straight in her charcoal business suit, legs crossed at the ankle. Her fingers fidgeted with her wedding ring, the only visible sign of her anxiety. Next to her, Michael slouched in his chair, his 6'2" frame somehow looking smaller today. At 38, the middle child had always been the peacemaker, but today his usual easy smile was nowhere to be found. And then there was Emma, the youngest at 35, who hadn't stopped crying since she'd arrived from Seattle yesterday. Her eyes were swollen, red-rimmed, her blonde hair hastily pulled back into a messy ponytail. "I appreciate you all coming today," Walter said, his voice gravelly with age and sympathy. The 70-year-old lawyer had known them since they were children, had watched them grow up, and now found himself in the unenviable position of potentially tearing them apart. "As you know, your parents, Robert and Margaret Richardson, left explicit instructions about their estate." Sarah nodded curtly. "Let's get this over with." Walter opened the leather portfolio on his desk and adjusted his reading glasses. "Before I begin, I want to remind you that your parents loved all three of you very much." "Why does that sound like a warning?" Emma whispered, her voice cracking. Walter cleared his throat. "The family home in Oak Ridge Heights goes to Emma, along with a trust fund of $200,000. Emma's breath caught. She hadn't expected this. The colonial house with its wraparound porch and maple trees had been their childhood home, the setting for every Christmas, every birthday, every family gathering. She'd assumed it would be sold, the proceeds split between the three of them. The summer cottage at Lake Windermere and its surrounding 10 acres goes to Michael, along with a trust fund of $200,000 and your father's collection of vintage cars. Michael simply stared at the carpet, his expression unreadable. And to Sarah, Walter continued, his voice noticeably softer. Your parents have left their investment portfolio valued at approximately $150,000, and your mother's personal jewelry collection. Sarah's head snapped up. That's it. The silence that followed was deafening. I'm afraid so, Walter said, looking genuinely remorseful. This doesn't make any sense, Sarah said, her voice rising. The house alone is worth almost $1 million. The lake property is at least $800,000. And Dad's cars? Another $250,000 easy. She shot to her feet, legal training kicking in. There has to be a mistake. I'm the executor of their estate. It says so right on their previous will. Walter adjusted his glasses again. The will was changed 6 months ago, Sarah. Your father asked me not to disclose this to any of you until after. Well, until today. Sarah turned to her siblings, fury and disbelief contorting her features. Did you know about this? Either of you? Emma shrank back into her chair. Of course not. Michael finally looked up. Why would we know? Because this... Sarah gestured wildly at Walter. This doesn't make any sense. We always talked about splitting everything equally. Always. Dad promised me. There's more, Walter said, his voice gentle but firm. They left letters for each of you. Private letters explaining their decisions. He slid 3 sealed envelopes across his desk. Sarah snatched hers, tore it open, and began reading. Her face paled, then flushed crimson. Without a word, she crumpled the letter into a ball and threw it across the room. Sarah, what? Michael began. I've worked my ass off for 20 years, she cut him off. I put myself through law school. I made partner by 35. I've got the biggest house, the most successful husband, the perfect kids, and what do? They punish me for being successful. I'm sure that's not. Emma started. Don't, Sarah warned, pointing a manicured finger at her sister. You've always been their favorite. Sweet little Emma who needed taking care of, who couldn't manage on her own, who called them crying every time life got hard. Emma recoiled as if slapped. That's not fair. No, you know what's not fair? Sarah's voice was dangerous now. I have spent my entire adult life trying to make them proud. Do you know how many school plays I missed because I was working late? How many of Jason's soccer games I had to skip? How many anniversaries Tom and I celebrated over rushed takeout because I had to prepare for court? All to be worthy of the Richardson name, to live up to Dad's expectations. And this is what I get. Michael stood up, positioning himself between his sisters. Maybe we should all take some time to read our letters and process this before we say things we can't take back. Sarah laughed, a harsh sound without a trace of humor. Oh, I've processed enough. This is a slap in the face, and I won't stand for it. I'll contest the will. Walter cleared his throat. Your father anticipated that response, Sarah. There's a no contest clause. If any of you challenge the will, you forfeit your entire inheritance. You knew, Sarah accused, turning on the lawyer. You knew this would happen, and you did nothing. I advised your father against it, Walter admitted. But he was adamant. Said it was time to set things right. Set things right? What does that even mean? Sarah demanded. Michael held up his unopened letter. Maybe if we all read these, we'd understand better. Don't be naive, Michael, Sarah snapped. They're dead. We'll never understand. And now we're left to clean up the mess. She grabbed her designer handbag and headed for the door. I need some air. The door slammed behind her, leaving Emma in tears and Michael staring after his sister, his own letter still sealed in his hand. I'm so sorry, Walter said into the heavy silence. Your parents truly believed they were doing what was right. Did they say anything else? Michael asked quietly. Anything that might explain? Walter hesitated. Your father mentioned that there were things in the past that needed to be addressed. He said the letters would explain everything, and that he hoped someday you'd all understand why he made these choices. Emma wiped her eyes with a tissue. Sarah will never forgive them. Or us. Give her time, Michael said, though his voice lacked conviction. We're still family. But as they gathered their things and stepped out into the rain, both siblings wondered if that was still true. The Richardson family, once tightly knit despite their differences, had just been torn apart by the very people who had always held them together. Michael sat in his apartment that evening, rain still drumming against the windows, staring at the unopened letter. His coffee had gone cold hours ago. The ticking of the wall clock seemed unnaturally loud in the silence. He'd called Sarah 3 times, straight to voicemail each time. Emma had texted to say she was okay, but needed time alone. The Richardson siblings, once inseparable despite their differences, were now scattered like leaves in a storm. Finally, he slid his finger under the seal and unfolded the letter. My dear son, his father's familiar handwriting began. If you're reading this, then Walter has done as I asked. I know today has been difficult. I know Sarah is angry and Emma is hurt. I'm sorry for that. But there are things you don't know, things your mother and I kept from all of you. Michael's heart began to pound. He reached for his cold coffee anyway, needing something to hold on to. 20 years ago, when Sarah was in college, she made a terrible mistake. She was driving home from a party, had been drinking. She hit someone, a boy on a bicycle. He was badly injured. Your sister panicked and left the scene. Michael's breath caught. This couldn't be true. Not Sarah, the rule follower, the high achiever. She came home hysterical. Your mother and I made the worst decision of our lives. We covered it up. We paid for the boy's medical care anonymously. We fixed Sarah's car in a town 40 miles away. We lied to police when they came asking questions. The coffee mug slipped from Michael's fingers, shattering on the hardwood floor. He barely noticed. The boy was in a coma for 2 weeks. His name was Daniel Keating. He was 16 years old. When he woke up, he had permanent brain damage. He never finished high school, never went to college, never had the life he should have had. Tears blurred Michael's vision. He wiped them away with the back of his hand. Sarah wanted to come clean, but we convinced her not to. We told her it would ruin her future. We were protecting her, but in doing so, we failed as parents. We taught her that she could escape the consequences of her actions. That money could fix anything. I've regretted it every day since. Michael got up, leaving the broken mug where it lay, and began pacing. The summer house we left you, it should have been sold years ago. We kept it because Sarah begged us not to sell it. It was her favorite place. We indulged her out of guilt. But the truth is, we should have sold it and used that money to help Daniel. Instead, we kept it out of selfishness. Michael froze, staring out at the city lights. The lake house held so many happy memories. Fishing with his dad, campfires with marshmallows, his first kiss with Jenny Sullivan when he was 15. All those perfect summers had been built on someone else's tragedy. As for Emma, the house belongs to her because she's the only one who ever showed interest in preserving it. You and Sarah both wanted new, bigger, better. But Emma loved that house for what it was, not what it could be worth. That much was true. While Sarah had moved to her McMansion in the suburbs and Michael had embraced city living, Emma had always talked about raising her own family someday in a house just like their childhood home. What we've done with our will isn't about punishing Sarah or favoring you and Emma. It's about trying, in some small way, to right a wrong. Last year, I found Daniel Keating. He's alive, Michael, working as a janitor at a high school in Cleveland, living in a small apartment with his mother, who had to quit her job to care for him. I've set up a trust for him, anonymously, with most of our remaining money. It's not enough. It will never be enough. Michael sank back onto the couch, his legs suddenly unable to support him. I've left Sarah less not to punish her, but because she's never fully faced what happened. She's built her life around appearing perfect, achieving more, having more. I hope that this might finally make her confront the past. I love your sister deeply, but I cannot leave this world knowing I helped her escape responsibility for her actions. There was more, but Michael couldn't read it through his tears. He set the letter down and buried his face in his hands. His phone buzzed. Emma, did you read your letter? Her text said. Yes, he typed back. We need to talk. All of us. Sarah's not answering. I know where she is, Michael replied, already reaching for his keys. 40 minutes later, he pulled into the parking lot of O'Malley's, the dive bar near Sarah's old college. Sure enough, her silver Audi was parked haphazardly across 2 spaces. Inside, the bar was nearly empty. A Tuesday night in the rain wasn't bringing in the crowds. Sarah sat alone at the far end, nursing what looked like whiskey. Her perfect chignon had come undone, dark hair spilling over her shoulders. She didn't look up when he slid onto the stool beside her. How did you know I'd be here? She asked, voice slightly slurred. Because this is where you came the night Mom had her cancer scare. And when you thought Tom was cheating. You always come here when your world is falling apart. Congratulations on your inheritance, she said bitterly. Lake house, cars, money. Dad always liked you best. Michael didn't rise to the bait. I know about Daniel Keating. The color drained from Sarah's face. Her hand tightened around her glass until her knuckles went white. What did you just say? Daniel Keating. The boy on the bicycle. The hit and run. Sarah's eyes darted around the bar, but no one was paying attention to them. How do you? Dad told me in his letter. That's what this is all about, Sarah. Not punishing you for being successful. Trying to make things right. After 20 years? Sarah's laugh was hollow. A little late, don't you think? It's never too late to do the right thing, says the guy who just inherited a lake house and $250,000. Sarah drained her glass. Easy for you to be philosophical. I'm selling it. That got her attention. What? The lake house, the cars. I'm selling all of it and giving the money to Daniel Keating. Sarah stared at him in disbelief. You can't be serious. Completely serious. Dad set up a trust for him, but it's not enough. It'll never be enough. It was an accident, Michael. Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper. I know, but leaving the scene wasn't. Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks. I was 19. I was scared. I know. And Mom and Dad made it worse by helping you cover it up. The bartender approached, but Michael waved him away. Why are you doing this? Sarah asked. Trying to be the hero? The good son? No. I'm trying to be the brother who helps his sister do what she's needed to do for 20 years. Sarah looked away. I can't. You can. And you're not alone. Emma and I will be right there with you. Emma knows too. Fresh horror dawned on Sarah's face. Michael nodded. Dad told us both. Different details, same story. Sarah buried her face in her hands. I've spent 20 years trying to forget, building the perfect life to make up for it, working myself to death to prove I was worthy. I know. And now what? I just throw it all away? My career? My marriage? My kids' respect? You don't have to throw anything away. You just have to face it. Sarah looked up at him. Mascara streaked down her cheeks. How? We start by meeting him. Daniel. All 3 of us. He'll hate me. Maybe. Probably. You'll have to live with that. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. The lake house was my favorite place in the world, she finally said. Dad knew that. That's why he left it to me, Michael said gently. He knew I'd be willing to let it go. Sarah nodded slowly, understanding dawning. And the family home to Emma because she'll treasure it. Preserve it. Exactly. They thought about everything, didn't they? Every detail, every reaction. They tried to make it right in the only way they could think of. Sarah reached for her purse, pulled out her wallet. She dropped some bills on the bar and stood up. I need to sober up. And then we need to call Emma. Michael stood too, relief washing over him. I already did. She's waiting at my place. Outside, the rain had stopped. The parking lot glistened under the streetlights. I can't drive, Sarah said, dangling her keys. Too much whiskey. I'll drive you. We can get your car tomorrow. As they walked to his car, Sarah suddenly stopped. Do you think he'll ever forgive me? Michael didn't sugarcoat it. I don't know. But this isn't about his forgiveness, Sarah. It's about you finally forgiving yourself. She nodded, blinking back fresh tears. 20 years is a long time to carry something like this. Too long. Michael agreed, unlocking his car. Let's go get Emma. It's time for the Richardsons to face this together. As they drove through the quiet streets, neither spoke. But when Michael glanced over, he saw Sarah holding her crumpled letter, slowly smoothing out the creases, preparing herself to finally read the painful truth she'd been running from for half her life. The Greyhound station in Cleveland looked like it had been forgotten by time. Cracked linoleum floors, plastic chairs bolted to the ground, vending machines that belonged in a museum. Sarah, Michael, and Emma sat in a row, barely speaking, watching the clock tick toward noon. Emma kept nervously tucking her hair behind her ears. What if he doesn't show up? He'll show up, Michael said. I spoke to his mother yesterday. She said he was curious. Sarah hadn't slept in the 3 days since their meeting at O'Malley's. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and she'd foregone her usual immaculate makeup. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, a far cry from her usual power suits. Remind me what we're going to say, she said, voice tight with anxiety. We're going to tell him the truth, Michael replied. All of it. And then what? Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she clasped them in her lap. Then we listen, Emma said gently. Whatever he needs to say, we listen. The station door slid open, and a man entered. He was of average height, with sandy brown hair cut close to his scalp. His left arm hung slightly awkward at his side, and he walked with a subtle but unmistakable limp. Behind him came an older woman with the same colored hair, streaked with gray. That's them, Michael said quietly, standing up. The 3 Richardson siblings formed an awkward line as Daniel Keating and his mother approached. Up close, Daniel's injuries were more apparent. A scar that ran from his left temple down to his jaw, the slightly vacant look in his eyes, the way he leaned on his mother for support. I'm Michael Richardson, Michael said, extending his hand. These are my sisters, Emma and Sarah. Daniel looked at the offered hand for a moment before shaking it. His grip was firm but brief. Daniel Keating. This is my mom, Linda. Linda Keating was small but sturdy looking, with lines carved deep around her eyes and mouth. She didn't offer her hand. Let's sit down, she said. They arranged themselves in a circle of plastic chairs. Daniel sat directly across from Sarah, studying her face with unsettling intensity. You don't look like I imagined, he said. His speech was slightly slower than normal, deliberate, as if each word required extra effort. Sarah couldn't hold his gaze. What did you imagine? A monster. He said it matter-of-factly. When you're 16 and someone hits you with their car and drives away, you picture a monster. Linda placed a hand on her son's knee, but said nothing. I'm so sorry, Sarah whispered. The words, rehearsed 100 times in her head, felt pathetically inadequate. 20 years, Linda said, speaking for the first time. 20 years we've wondered who did this to my boy. 20 years of surgeries and therapy and watching him struggle with things that used to come easy. 20 years of maybe someday we'll know why. Her voice was controlled, but rage simmered just beneath the surface. We can't change the past, Michael began. Don't, Linda cut him off. Don't try to make this easier. Nothing about this has been easy. You're right, Emma said softly. We have no right to ask for forgiveness or understanding. Then why are we here? Daniel asked. He didn't sound angry, just curious. Sarah finally looked up, meeting his eyes. Because it's time you knew the truth. Because I've been a coward for 20 years, and I can't be a coward anymore. Our parents helped cover it up, Michael added. They paid for some of your medical bills anonymously. They fixed the car, lied to police. Linda's laugh was bitter. Those anonymous donations. We used to pray for our guardian angel. Turns out it was just guilt money. Yes, Sarah admitted. That's exactly what it was. Did they ever consider coming forward? Linda asked. Ever? The siblings exchanged glances. Our father wanted to, Emma said, after a few years. But by then it would have just looked worse, Sarah finished. And I convinced them not to. I was in law school by then. I was afraid of losing everything. While my son had already lost everything, Linda said. Daniel put his hand over his mother's. Not everything, Mom. The simple gesture, him comforting her, made tears spring to Sarah's eyes. I brought something, Sarah said, reaching into her bag. She pulled out a thick manila envelope. All the information about the trust our father set up for you. It's not much, about $400,000. Linda's eyes widened. What? And this? Michael added, producing a folder of his own. The paperwork for the sale of the lake house and my father's car collection. Another $630,000. It's all going to you. Daniel stared at the folders. I don't understand. It's reparation, Sarah explained. Not compensation. Nothing could compensate for what happened to you. But it's something. Over $1 million, Linda said, voice faint. There's more, Emma said. Sarah's firm has agreed to represent you, pro bono, in setting up a proper long-term care trust. And I've been in touch with specialists at the Cleveland Neurological Institute about new treatments that might help with some of your ongoing symptoms. Daniel looked overwhelmed. Why now? After all this time? Our parents died last month, Michael explained. In their will, they tried to make things right. They left clues that led us to you. They never had the courage to face you themselves, Sarah added. But we do. I do. She took a deep breath. I was 19. I'd been drinking at a party. I was driving too fast. It was dark and raining. I didn't see you until it was too late. Daniel closed his eyes, his breathing quickening. I hit you, and you flew over the hood of my car. I stopped. I got out. You weren't moving, but you were breathing. I called 911 from a payphone, didn't leave my name. Then I drove away. Sarah's voice broke. I've relived that moment every day for 20 years. I don't remember any of it, Daniel said, opening his eyes. The accident, the hospital, the first few months after. It's all blank. Maybe that's a blessing, Linda said. No, Daniel disagreed. It's like having a chapter ripped out of my book. Everyone else knows what happened to me except me. An uncomfortable silence fell over the group. Finally, Sarah reached into her bag again. I brought one more thing, she said, pulling out a small rectangular object wrapped in tissue paper. You don't have to take it. You can throw it away. But I thought you should have it. Daniel unwrapped it carefully. It was a framed photograph of a teenage boy on a red bicycle, grinning at the camera, his whole life ahead of him. Where did you get this? Linda gasped. Your old house in Oak Ridge. I drove by it 100 times over the years. I saw this picture in the local paper's coverage of the accident. I cut it out. Kept it. Sarah's voice was barely audible. To remind myself of what I'd done. Daniel traced his finger over the glass. I love that bike. Saved up for it for 2 years. I know, Sarah whispered. The article mentioned that. Daniel looked up, his expression unreadable. What do you want from me? The question hung in the air. Nothing, Sarah finally said. We want nothing from you. We're here to give you the truth, the money, the resources, and then we'll disappear from your life if that's what you want. Is that what you want? Daniel asked. To disappear? Sarah hadn't expected the question. I don't know. It seems like the least painful option for you. Daniel turned to his mother. What do you think, Mom? Linda's face was a battlefield of emotions. I've spent 20 years hating a faceless person. Now that person has a face, a name, a family. I don't know what to think. I'm angry, Daniel said simply. I'm angry and sad and confused. But I'm also tired of being defined by the worst thing that ever happened to me. He set the photograph down carefully. I don't want your money. Daniel, his mother began. No, Mom. I don't want it. Not like this. He looked at each of the siblings in turn. I don't want a check and a goodbye. I want justice. Sarah nodded slowly. I understand. I'll go to the police today. Tell them everything. That's not what I mean, Daniel said. The statute of limitations ran out years ago. You can't be prosecuted now. Oh, Sarah said, confused. I want to know who you are. All of you. I want to know about the lives you've lived while I've been struggling through mine. I want to understand why this happened, how it happened. I want the whole story, not just the worst chapter. The Richardson siblings exchanged glances. That seems fair, Michael said carefully. More than fair, Emma added. Sarah studied Daniel's face. You want to get to know us? What? Because otherwise, you're just the drunk driver who ruined my life. You're just a villain in my story, and I'm just a victim in yours. Daniel's words were slow but clear. I think we're all more complicated than that. You're a better person than I am, Sarah said, wiping away tears. Probably, Daniel agreed, and for the first time, a hint of a smile touched his lips. But I've had 20 years of therapy to work on that. The unexpected moment of levity broke some of the tension. Even Linda's rigid posture softened slightly. So what now? Emma asked. Now, Daniel said. We take the $1 million and set up the trust your sister mentioned. My mom deserves to retire. I deserve the best care possible. He looked at Sarah. And then maybe we have coffee. Talk. See where it goes. I'd like that, Sarah said quietly. I'm not promising forgiveness, Daniel warned. I don't know if I have that in me. I'm not asking for it, Sarah replied. I don't deserve it. Daniel nodded, satisfied with her answer. Good. That's a place to start. As they prepared to leave the station, Linda pulled Sarah aside. For 20 years, I've imagined what I'd say to the person who hit my son. I had speeches prepared, curses ready, anger so deep it became part of me. Her voice was low, intended for Sarah alone. But seeing you now, hearing your voice break when you talk about it, I realized something. What's that? Sarah asked. There were 2 victims that night. Daniel, of course, but also a 19-year-old girl who made one terrible mistake and has been punishing herself ever since. Linda's eyes were hard but not unkind. Don't get me wrong, I'm still furious with you. But I'm starting to understand what Daniel means about being more than just the worst chapter of our stories. Sarah couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. As they walked out into the sunlight, the unlikely group moved awkwardly together, bound by a tragedy none of them had fully processed until now. They weren't friends. They might never be. But they were connected by pain, by truth, and now by the tentative possibility of something like healing. In the parking lot, Daniel paused, looking up at the clear blue sky. 20 years, he mused. Feels like we're finally turning the page. The Richardson siblings, standing side by side for the first time in weeks, silently agreed. Whatever came next, legal complications, emotional reckonings, the slow and uncertain process of making amends, they would face it together, the way they should have 20 years ago. The revelation rippled through Sarah's life like a stone thrown into still water. 2 weeks after meeting Daniel, she sat at her kitchen island, staring at the divorce papers Tom had served her that morning. I don't understand, she'd said when he handed them to her, his face a mask of hurt and betrayal. 20 years, Tom. It was 20 years ago. It's not about when it happened, he'd replied, his voice flat. It's that you never told me. We've been married for 15 years, Sarah. I told you everything, every mistake, every regret. And you kept this from me. Now she traced the edge of the papers with her fingertip, wondering how many more consequences were still waiting to unfold. Her phone buzzed with texts from her law partners. They'd been surprisingly supportive about her pro bono work for Daniel. But the news that she'd been involved in a hit-and-run had caused ripples of concern. No criminal charges could be filed after so much time, but the ethical implications for a partner at Jenkins, Wyatt, and Richardson were another matter. The front door opened, and her 16-year-old daughter Megan trudged in, dropping her backpack on the floor. Dad's staying at Uncle Rick's, she announced without preamble. I know, honey. He's really mad. I know that too. Megan leaned against the counter. Is it true? What he told us? Sarah put the papers down. She'd promised herself no more lies, no more evasions. Yes, I hit someone with my car when I was in college. I left the scene. My parents helped cover it up. Megan's face crumpled slightly. Why would you do that? Because I was scared and selfish. Not you. Grandma and Grandpa. They always told us to take responsibility. Sarah had wondered the same thing countless times in the past weeks. They thought they were protecting me. They made a terrible mistake. And now this guy, Daniel. Daniel, Megan corrected herself. He's going to get all the money from great-grandma's trust fund? And Uncle Michael's selling the lake house because of him. For him, not because of him. And yes, that's what's happening. Megan was quiet for a moment. Dad says you could lose your job, that we might have to sell the house. Sarah sighed. I don't know what's going to happen with my job. The ethics committee is reviewing the case. As for the house, she looked around at the custom kitchen, the imported tile, the designer fixtures, all the trappings of success she'd accumulated to prove her worth. Would it be so terrible if we had to downsize? I guess not, Megan said, surprising her mother. Janie Lewis's parents got divorced last year, and they moved to a smaller house. She says it's actually better because they're all closer together. Sarah smiled sadly. That's a nice way of looking at it. Can I meet him? Daniel. The question caught Sarah off guard. Why would you want to? Megan shrugged, sudden shyness making her seem younger than her 16 years. I don't know. He's a big part of our story now, isn't he? And I've been thinking about what happened. It could have been me on that bike, you know? A chill ran through Sarah. That's exactly what keeps me up at night. So can I. Let me talk to him first. See if he's open to it. Megan nodded, then picked up her backpack. I'm going to go do homework. Wait, Sarah said. Are you? How are you feeling about all this? Megan considered the question with remarkable thoughtfulness for a teenager. I'm mad that you lied, and sad that Grandma and Grandpa weren't who I thought they were. But, she paused. But I'm also kind of proud that you're trying to fix it now, even though it's hard. As her daughter disappeared upstairs, Sarah felt something shift inside her. Not forgiveness, exactly, but the first fragile tendrils of hope that perhaps her family wouldn't be destroyed by the truth after all. Across town, Emma sat in her small apartment, surrounded by boxes. The movers would come tomorrow to take her things to the family home. Her home now, though it still felt surreal to think of it that way. Her phone rang. It was Jason, her ex-boyfriend. Hey, she answered, tucking the phone between her ear and shoulder as she continued taping a box. Just checking in, he said. How's it going with the move? Chaotic, but okay. And the family drama? Emma sighed. Jason had broken up with her just before her parents' deaths, exhausted by what he called her pathological need to fix everyone's problems. The irony that he was calling now to see how she was handling the biggest family crisis of all wasn't lost on her. It's complicated. Sarah's marriage is on the rocks. Michael's selling everything. I'm trying to keep us all talking to each other. Sounds like you're still in the middle of everyone's problems, Jason observed. Maybe that's where I belong, Emma replied, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. Maybe being in the middle isn't a weakness. I never said it was a weakness. You didn't have to. It was clear in every eye roll when I took a call from Sarah, every sigh when I rearranged plans to help Michael with something. The line went quiet for a moment. I didn't call to fight. Why did you call, Jason? Another pause. I miss you. 6 weeks ago, those words would have made her heart sore. Now they just made her tired. I have to go. The movers are coming early. After hanging up, Emma sat on her couch, surrounded by the half-packed remnants of her life. For years, she'd defined herself as the family peacekeeper, the one who smoothed things over, who made everyone comfortable. Jason had seen it as a flaw, an inability to stand up for herself. But these past weeks had shown her something different. Being the bridge between people wasn't a weakness. Sometimes it was the strongest position of all. Her phone buzzed with a text from Michael. Meeting with Keating family tomorrow at 2. Can you make it? I'll be there, she typed back. Meanwhile, Michael stood in the empty living room of the lake house, watching the sunset turn the water to fire. The prospective buyers had just left, a young couple with twin toddlers and stars in their eyes. They'd talked excitedly about summer barbecues and teaching the kids to swim, about making memories that would last a lifetime. Just like the memories he was preparing to sell. His phone vibrated in his pocket. It was Jenny Sullivan, his high school girlfriend who'd reconnected with him at his parents' funeral. They'd been out for coffee twice since then, innocent catch-ups between old friends. Except Michael couldn't deny the flutter in his chest when her name appeared on his screen. How did it go with the buyers? Her text read. They loved it. Made an offer on the spot. And how do you feel about that? Michael stared out at the water. How did he feel? Sad. Relieved. Guilty for feeling relieved. Complicated, he texted back. Want to talk about it? I could meet you there. He hesitated. Jenny was divorced now, with a 12-year-old son who stayed with his father on Wednesday nights. She was free, and God knew Michael could use the company. But was it fair to drag her into his family's mess? Another time, he replied. I'm heading back to the city soon. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and walked out to the dock. This place had been his sanctuary since childhood, the spot where he'd learned to fish with his father, where he'd kissed Jenny for the first time at 15, where he'd come to think when college got overwhelming, when his first business failed, when his engagement to Carolyn had fallen apart. And now he was letting it go. For Daniel Keating, a man he'd met exactly twice. Was it worth it? The question haunted him as he drove back to the city that night. Not because he doubted the decision to sell, but because some small, selfish part of him wanted credit for the sacrifice. Wanted Daniel and his mother to acknowledge the enormity of what he was giving up. But that wasn't the point, was it? The point was making amends, not getting credit for it. As the city skyline came into view, Michael thought about his siblings. Sarah, wading through the wreckage of her carefully constructed life. Emma, forever trying to hold them all together. Their parents had left them a terrible legacy, not just the material possessions assigned in their will, but the moral weight of their decisions. His phone buzzed again. This time it was Daniel. Looking forward to meeting tomorrow. Bringing someone I'd like you all to meet. Michael frowned. Linda would be there, of course. Who else would Daniel bring? He tried to tamp down his curiosity as he pulled into his apartment building's garage. Tomorrow would bring answers enough. For now, he just needed sleep, and perhaps the courage to face whatever new complications awaited the Richardson family in the morning. The small community center meeting room wasn't anyone's first choice, but it offered neutral ground. Daniel had suggested it, halfway between his neighborhood and the parts of the city where the Richardsons lived their separate lives. Sarah arrived first, 15 minutes early as usual. She'd come straight from a meeting with the law firm's ethics committee. No decision yet, but the partners' faces had been grim. She tried not to think about it as she arranged the chairs in a circle, a small gesture of control in a situation where she had almost none. Emma arrived next, carrying a cardboard tray of coffee cups. I didn't know what everyone drinks, so I got a variety, she explained, setting them on the table. Always the peacemaker, Sarah said, but without her usual edge. Someone has to be, Emma replied with a small smile. Michael entered with the real estate agent's contract in hand. Offer's been accepted. We close in 30 days. He looked around. No Daniel yet. We're still early, Emma said, checking her watch. They fell into an awkward silence. These three siblings who had once been so close. In the wake of their parents' deaths and the revelation of the family secret, they'd been functioning as a unit out of necessity. But the easy rapport that had once defined their relationship was still missing. Tom's filing for full custody, Sarah said abruptly. Emma's head snapped up. He can't do that. Actually, he can. Character and fitness issues. My judgment is in question. Michael dropped into a chair. That's ridiculous. The accident happened before you even met him. But the cover-up continued throughout our marriage. And now there's the potential disbarment. Sarah's voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly. He thinks I'm an unfit mother. That's bull, Michael began, but was interrupted by the door opening. Daniel entered, followed by Linda and a young woman none of them recognized. She was perhaps 25, with Daniel's sandy hair and a cautious smile. Sorry we're late, Daniel said. Traffic was worse than we expected. The Richardson siblings rose automatically, their personal drama momentarily set aside. This is my sister, Abby, Daniel said, gesturing to the young woman. She wanted to meet you. A sister. None of them had known. Abby stepped forward, her gaze moving between the three siblings before settling on Sarah. I was 12 when Daniel was hurt, she said without preamble. I remember everything about that night. The police at our door. The hospital. My parents falling apart. Her voice was calm, matter of fact. I've hated you for half my life. Sarah flinched but held her ground. I understand. No, you don't, Abby said, not unkindly. How could you? But I'm not here to make you feel worse. I'm here because Daniel asked me to come, and because I need to see you for myself. Please, sit down, Emma offered, gesturing to the chairs. We have coffee, if you'd like some. They arranged themselves in the circle Sarah had prepared. Linda sat between her children, her face unreadable. I brought the paperwork from the trust, Michael said, sliding a folder across the table to Linda. Everything's set up. The funds will be available next week. And I've scheduled a consultation with the neurologist I mentioned, Emma added. If Daniel's interested, of course. Daniel nodded. I am. Thank you. The formal exchange of information filled the first 20 minutes, practical details that needed attention. But as the logistics were sorted, an uncomfortable silence began to creep in. They were running out of business to discuss. So, Abby said finally, into the awkward quiet. Are we just going to pretend this isn't the strangest situation any of us has ever been in? A startled laugh escaped Sarah. God, no. This is absolutely bizarre. Surreal, Michael agreed. I keep thinking I'm going to wake up and find out this was all some elaborate dream, Emma admitted. Nightmare, you mean? Linda muttered. Mom, Daniel said softly. Linda sighed. I'm trying, Danny. It's not easy. None of this is easy, Sarah acknowledged. For any of us. But especially not for you. She looked directly at Linda. I want you to know that whatever happens with the money, with the legal arrangements, with everything else, I will spend the rest of my life trying to make amends for what I did to your family. Why? Abby asked suddenly. I mean, I get the guilt. I get wanting to fix things. But this level of dedication, it's more than just clearing your conscience, isn't it? Sarah considered the question carefully. When I was 19, I made the worst mistake of my life. But the real damage, to my soul, to my humanity, wasn't hitting Daniel with my car. It was driving away. It was putting my future ahead of his life. She swallowed hard. Since then, I've built a career defending people who made terrible choices. I told myself I was serving justice, but really, I was trying to convince myself that everyone deserves a second chance, including me. The room was quiet, the only sound the faint hum of the air conditioning. Daniel deserves more than money, Sarah continued. He deserves to know that his life matters, enough to change other lives. Mine, my parents, my siblings. Daniel studied her for a long moment. I think I believe you, he said finally. I don't, Linda said bluntly. Not yet. Maybe not ever. That's fair, Sarah said. But, Linda added reluctantly, I'm willing to see where this goes. Michael cleared his throat. There's something else we should discuss. Daniel, you mentioned wanting to know more about us, about our lives. I think we owe you that. But it goes both ways. What do you mean? Daniel asked. I mean, if we're going to have any kind of relationship, whatever that looks like, we need to know you too. Not just as the person Sarah hurt, but as yourself. Daniel smiled slightly. That's actually why I brought Abby. She knows me better than anyone. Even better than Mom, sometimes. It's true, Abby said. And I can tell you that my brother is stubborn, loves terrible sci-fi movies, and makes the world's worst spaghetti. Hey, Daniel protested, but he was smiling. He also volunteers at the high school where he works, coaching kids with disabilities. And he remembers everyone's birthday, even people he barely knows. Emma leaned forward, genuine interest in her eyes. What kind of sci-fi movies? The cheesier the better, Abby groaned. Attack of the Killer Tomatoes is a personal favorite. That's a classic, Michael exclaimed. And just like that, the energy in the room shifted. Not to friendship, exactly, but to something more human than the formal exchange of information and apologies that had dominated their previous meetings. As the conversation continued, Sarah found herself watching Daniel, not with guilt or pity, but with growing curiosity. Who was this man who could face his worst nightmare with such grace? Who could sit across from the person who'd altered the course of his life and still find it in himself to laugh? Linda caught her looking and held her gaze, a wordless communication passing between them. I see you watching my son. I haven't forgotten what you did. But I'm here, aren't I? Sarah, Daniel said, breaking into her thoughts. Abby mentioned you have kids? 2, Sarah replied. Megan's 16 and Jason's 13. 16, Daniel repeated. Same age I was. Sarah nodded, the parallel not lost on her. Megan actually asked if she could meet you. Daniel looked surprised. Why would she want that? I think she's trying to understand. All of this. What did you tell her about me? The truth. That I hit you with my car and left you there. That you were badly injured. That my parents and I covered it up. Daniel nodded slowly. And how did she take it? Better than I deserved, honestly. She's angry, confused. But she's also, I don't know, processing it in a way that makes me think she might be a better person than I was at her age. I'd like to meet her, Daniel said, surprising everyone, including himself judging by his expression. Are you sure? Linda asked, concern creasing her forehead. Yeah, Daniel said. I am. She's part of this story too, isn't she? As the meeting wound down, plans were made. Daniel would meet Megan. Michael would continue with the sale of the lake house. Emma would coordinate with the neurologists. The Richardsons and the Keatings, 2 families bound by tragedy, were tentatively finding a way forward. In the parking lot afterward, Sarah lingered, watching Daniel help his mother into their car. She felt a presence beside her and turned to find Abby. He has bad days, Abby said without preamble. Days when he can barely get out of bed because the pain is so bad. Days when he forgets simple words and gets so frustrated he cries. Days when he asks why this happened to him. Sarah felt sick. I never meant, of course you didn't. That's not my point. Abby fixed her with a steady gaze. My point is that if you're going to be in his life, in our lives, you need to know the whole truth, not just the sanitized version you see in these meetings. I want to know, Sarah said. All of it. Abby studied her for a moment longer, then nodded. I believe that at least. She turned to go, then paused. One more thing. Daniel doesn't need your pity. He needs your respect. As Sarah drove home, those words echoed in her mind. Respect, not pity. It was a distinction she hadn't fully considered until now. She'd been so focused on making amends, on easing her own guilt, that she hadn't stopped to think about what Daniel might actually need from her. Her phone rang, the car's Bluetooth system displaying Tom's name. She took a deep breath before answering. We need to talk, he said without greeting. About the kids. Yes, Sarah agreed. We do. But first, I need to tell you about the man whose life I changed 20 years ago. Really tell you. And I need you to listen. A pause. I'm listening. And as Sarah began to speak, she realized she was telling the story differently this time. Not as a confession, not as a plea for forgiveness, but as the complex, human narrative it was. One in which there were no simple villains or heroes, only people trying to find their way through the darkness they'd created for themselves. Autumn painted the Richardson family home in shades of amber and gold. 6 months had passed since the reading of the will that had changed everything. 6 months of painful truths, difficult conversations, and slow, cautious healing. Emma stood on the front porch, watching the cars pull into the driveway one by one. Michael's sensible sedan, Sarah's new, more modest SUV that had replaced her luxury car, and finally, a blue van with a wheelchair ramp, though Daniel rarely used the chair these days. They're here, Emma called into the house, where Megan was arranging a vegetable platter in the kitchen. I'll be right out, the teenager replied. It had been Megan's idea, this gathering. A not quite holiday, not quite celebration. Simply a day for two families, bound by tragedy and slowly connected by something more complex, to spend time together. Daniel emerged from the van first, moving with the careful gait Emma had come to recognize as his good day walk. Behind him came Linda, her face still lined with permanent worry but softer than it had been 6 months ago. Abby followed, carrying a covered dish, with a tall, bearded man, her fiancé, Derek, beside her. We brought Mom's potato salad, Abby announced as they reached the porch. Fair warning, it's terrible, but it's tradition. Emma laughed. Traditions matter, even the terrible ones. She gave Daniel a light hug, still marveling at how natural the gesture had become. Michael's bringing the grill around back. Sarah and the kids are inside. As they moved through the house, Emma's house now, though she still thought of it as her parents', Linda trailed her fingers along the familiar family photos on the wall. Emma had decided to keep them up, these visual reminders of the people who had made such consequential choices. Not to venerate them, but to remember them in their fullness, their virtues and their failures. In the backyard, Michael was showing Derek the finer points of charcoal arrangement, while Sarah and Jason set the picnic table. Megan sat with Daniel on the porch swing, deep in conversation as they had been whenever they were together over the past months. Their unlikely friendship had been the most unexpected development of all. The 16-year-old girl and the 36-year-old man had connected over a shared love of astronomy, of all things. Daniel had been an aspiring astrophysicist before the accident. Megan was considering it as a college major. They could talk for hours about distant galaxies and the mysteries of dark matter, finding common ground in the stars when earthbound conversations sometimes failed them. Looks like a perfect day for this, Michael observed, joining Emma by the kitchen window. As perfect as it can be, given the circumstances, she agreed. Michael studied her profile. You've done an amazing job with the house. Emma smiled. I've barely changed a thing. That's not what I meant. You've made it a home again. After everything that happened. It was true. While Sarah had faced the implosion of her marriage and career, while Michael had sold his beloved lake house and struggled with his own anger at their parents, Emma had quietly transformed the family home into a sanctuary. A place where painful truths could be spoken, where grief and healing could coexist. Someone had to, she said simply. Outside, Tom's car pulled up. Sarah stiffened visibly as her estranged husband approached with an awkward wave. Their divorce was nearly final, but they were finding a way to co-parent with something approaching civility. He dropped the custody battle after meeting Daniel, after seeing firsthand the journey of accountability Sarah had embarked on. "This is quite a gathering," Tom said as he joined them, handing Emma a bottle of wine. "That's one way of putting it," Sarah replied, but there was no bite in her words. Across the yard, Linda watched this exchange with narrowed eyes. She still struggled the most with forgiveness, with acceptance. Emma couldn't blame her. A mother's anger at those who harmed her child wasn't something that could, or should, be easily set aside. "Need any help with that?" Emma asked Michael, who was now arranging burgers on the grill. "Nope. This is the one thing I'm actually good at." "That's not true," she said reflexively. "I know." He smiled, his expression lighter than it had been in months. "Ginny keeps telling me the same thing." "How is she?" Emma asked, pleased to see a flush creep up her brother's neck at the mention of his high school girlfriend turned new romance. "Good. She wanted to come today, but her son has a soccer tournament. Next time." "Yeah," Michael said, and Emma heard the hope in his voice. The possibility of a future where gatherings like this, complicated, messy, but rooted in truth, would be normal. The afternoon unfolded with the awkward pauses and careful conversations of people who were neither strangers nor friends, bound by circumstances none of them would have chosen. There were difficult moments, Linda flinching when Sarah laughed too loudly, Tom watching with visible discomfort as his children interacted with the man whose life his wife had nearly destroyed, Abby occasionally falling into strained silence, the weight of too many memories pressing down. But there were other moments too. Daniel showing Jason how to identify constellations using an app on his phone. Michael and Derek discovering a shared passion for vintage motorcycles. Megan and Abby deep in conversation about college options. Sarah and Linda, the most unlikely pair of all, working side by side in the kitchen without speaking, a fragile truce built on shared tasks. As the sun began to set, Emma brought out her mother's old apple pie recipe. The familiar cinnamon scent triggered a wave of emotion as she set it on the table. "Mom made this every fall," she said, her voice catching slightly. An uncomfortable silence fell over the gathering. It was the first direct mention of Robert and Margaret Richardson all day. Daniel was the one who broke it. "I've been thinking a lot about your parents," he said, his deliberate speech commanding everyone's attention. "About forgiveness." Sarah set down her fork, her face pale. "Daniel, you don't have to. I want to," he insisted gently. "I've had 6 months of getting to know you all. 6 months of seeing how their choices shaped you, for better and worse. And I've realized something important." Linda reached for her son's hand, concern etched on her face. "Danny, it's okay, Mom." He squeezed her fingers reassuringly before continuing. "What happened to me was terrible, inexcusable, but the cover-up, the secret you all carried, that damaged you in ways I'm only beginning to understand." Michael nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on his plate. "I'm not saying I forgive them," Daniel clarified. "I don't know if I ever will. But I see now that they were victims of their own bad choices too. Every year that passed made it harder to tell the truth. Every lie compounded the damage." "We should have known," Sarah said quietly. "As adults, we should have realized something was wrong. The way Dad would get quiet whenever accidents were mentioned on the news. The anonymous donations Mom kept insisting on making to brain injury charities. The way they both doted on Megan and Jason, as if trying to make up for something. Hindsight," Michael murmured. "Always clearer." Emma thought about the family home she'd inherited, the one they were gathered in now. Had her parents left it to her because they truly believed she would treasure it? Or because they knew she was the only one who might turn it into a place of healing rather than a monument to secrets? "I have something for you all," Daniel said, reaching for a folder he'd brought. "The new treatment we've been trying, the one Emma found. It's working better than expected. The neurologist says there's potential for significant improvement in my cognitive processing and pain levels." "That's wonderful," Emma said, genuine joy in her voice. "It's expensive," Daniel continued. "The trust fund is helping, but..." He opened the folder and pulled out a document. "This is a portion of the money from the lake house sale. I want to return it." Michael stared at him in disbelief. "What? What?" "Because I don't need all of it. And because I think your parents would have wanted you to have some part of that place you loved." "I don't understand," Michael said. "After everything that happened." "This isn't about erasing the past," Daniel explained. "It's about not letting it control the future." He smiled slightly. "A wise 13-year-old told me that." All eyes turned to Jason, who blushed and studied his sneakers. I can't take it, Michael said, pushing the document back. You can, Daniel insisted. Not to buy back the lake house, that's gone, but to build something new. Something that honors the good parts of your family's legacy while acknowledging the mistakes. Michael looked to his sisters, uncertainty written across his face. It should be your decision, Sarah told him. Ours, he corrected her. Whatever we do with it, we decide together. Emma felt a lump forming in her throat. 6 months ago, she'd wondered if her family would ever truly speak to each other again. Now here they were, making decisions as one. As twilight deepened around them, Linda rose from her seat. It's getting late, she said. Daniel gets tired. Mom, he protested mildly, but she was right. Emma could see the fatigue in the slight droop of his shoulders, the way his words had begun to slow even further. Before you go, Sarah said suddenly, I have news. She took a deep breath. The ethics committee made their decision last week. I've been suspended from practicing law for 18 months. Oh, Sarah, Emma said softly. It's actually better than I expected, Sarah admitted. And it's right. What I did, there should be consequences. What will you do? Tom asked, the first time he directly addressed her all evening. I've accepted a position teaching legal ethics at the community college, she said with a small, ironic smile. Seems fitting, doesn't it? And I'm volunteering with a victim advocacy group. Daniel nodded approvingly. Using your experience to help others. That matters. As the Keating family prepared to leave, the awkward dance of departure began. Who should hug whom? What should be said? How to end such an emotionally complex gathering? Emma watched her family navigate these uncertain waters, struck by how far they'd come and how far they still had to go. In the driveway, just before climbing into the van, Daniel turned to the assembled Richardsons. Someone asked me recently if I regret meeting you all, knowing the truth. If it would have been easier to go on with my life, never knowing who hit me that night. No one spoke. Even the evening birds seemed to hold their songs. I told them no, Daniel said simply. The truth is painful, sometimes unbearable. But secrets are poison. They don't just hurt the people they're kept from. They destroy the people keeping them. As the blue van pulled away, Emma stood between her siblings, their shoulders touching. The 3 Richardson children, now middle-aged adults, carrying the complicated legacy their parents had left them. He's a better person than any of us deserve, Michael said quietly. That's not the point, Sarah replied. Being worthy was never the point. Emma slipped her arms through her brothers and sisters, linking them together as they had stood as children, facing the world as one. The point, she said, is that we get to try. Every day, we get to try to be better than we were the day before. They stood in silence as darkness fell completely, 3 silhouettes against the warm light spilling from the family home behind them. Not healed, not whole, but no longer broken in the same ways they had been. The truth had shattered them, but in the breaking, it had created space for something new to grow. Something that, like Daniel had said, honored the good while acknowledging the mistakes. Something that might, with time and care, become its own kind of grace.